Good morning, Charles. Thank you so much for joining me this morning to talk through a little bit more about you, about Bostocke Close Investments, and how you came to be. So just to introduce you to all our viewers, this is Charles Anyawu, who is MD and CEO of Bostocke Close Investments.
Thank you, Sophie. Pleasure to be here with you as well.
Thank you. So I just want to sort of kick off our discussion today. If you wouldn't mind just sort of walking me through your professional journey and how you got to be where you are at the CEO of Bostocke Close Investments.
Okay, great. So this is taking us back through memory lane. I started off my career in business development, sales, more or less, and that was in construction. Moved on from that. So I did that in construction, and then I also did that in the learning and development space with a training company that had come in from the UK to Nigeria at the time. I moved on from that to the development space. Something similar, still around the learning and development, but more focused on youth employability as well as entrepreneurship, trying to support unemployed youth with access to skills that would enable them secure employment, as well as supporting them with the capacity to be able to build businesses of their own. Of course, as you can imagine, as a developing country, there's very limited formal work opportunities. So one of the things that we wanted to do at the time was to create a mechanism where people will be able to set up their own businesses and then employ people at the end of the day. So that I did in the private sector. And then I moved on from that to the public sector, where I started working with entrepreneurs to secure access to finance for their businesses. So it's been quite a journey, starting off first in business development, then working with young people to be able to set up a business, and then having set up that business, finally ending up in the position where we were able to then support people who have started the businesses with access to finance to grow, those businesses. So when I started off in the private sector in the development space, I also sat on both sides of the table. When I was with the After School Graduate Development Center, we were the ones who were putting proposals together and creating programs that will enable young people find jobs or create businesses. And then when I moved on to the Tony Elumelu Foundation, I was on the other side of the table where we were assessing proposals and deciding which proposals to support with financing to be able to create impact. So it's been almost full circle, and I thought that having done all of this, it would be important to then set up my own business. And one of the reasons why I did that was because when I was working in public sector for the Lagos State government as head of SME, I met with thousands of entrepreneurs, of course, Lagos being the economic hub for West Africa, if not Africa. At times, we would interview as many as 200, 300 businesses in a day. It was crazy. And I haven't heard some of the challenges that they had, and just knowing that some of these challenges cut across different regions within the country outside of Lagos, I thought that we could achieve more impact doing this outside of Lagos. Of course, working for the Lagos State government meant that there were restrictions as to geography where we could operate. And so also I had a lot of people coming to me, so I need funds for my business, I heard you this, I heard you're the head of SME in Lagos, we need money for our business, etc., even outside the scope of what we were doing in Lagos State at the time. So I just felt, hey, look, there seems to be an opportunity here. How can we create an entity that will help address this issue around access to finance for those who are somewhat disenfranchised? How can we also partner to create the capacity that is required to get them up to speed where they can actually then secure this financing? So that's the essence of why we started Bostocke Close Investments, and that's what we hope to achieve in the near future.
I mean, it's been on quite a journey, and it's great that you get to do something you're passionate, but also have the control and breadth of people that you can assist. So, as I said, you've had quite a journey, but what have been some of the most rewarding, but also some of the more challenging aspects of your role? And how do you think these highs and lows have shaped your leadership style?
Yeah, of course, starting a business isn't easy. Starting a business in an economy like Nigeria is even more difficult. But I think that one of the things that I have enjoyed doing what I'm doing now is just, I'd say, the freedom of my time, agreeing or just looking at this is what I want to do. We set the goal in terms of what we want to achieve, but we also have the flexibility to determine how we're going to go about, achieving that. And I think that it's put me in a position where I feel like there's contribution, that we are making a significant contribution that we are looking to make in the Nigerian economy. And we're trying to do this with one loan, one investment per time. So that's one of the joys of being where I am today and doing what I'm doing. In terms of the challenges, so challenges come in different shapes and sizes. And there's certain challenges which obviously are beyond your control. I tend not to focus on those. I like to focus more on what is within my sphere of influence and what we can do to help the business move forward. One of the major challenges, and I'm not surprised actually, when I started experiencing it firsthand, is in terms of manpower. And manpower not necessarily from the technical skill side of things, but more from the attitude side of things. The attitude in terms of taking ownership, having people who will take ownership for the role, in terms of delivering the objectives. And I've often heard people say that, oh, that has a lot to do with the hiring process, and how they come in and what you should look out for when hiring. But it's easier said than done, right? When you're starting off a small business, one thing, it tends to be a focus on, the overarching big picture. And then it takes a different skill set to come down to the nitty-gritty. And especially that's why you kind of need people, right? But being able to communicate this vision to these guys and having them take it on and drive it is a totally different thing. And if you also look at the caliber of people that, or the age bracket, they say working with Gen Zs is kind of different from what I experienced when we started our careers, where you sort of have a boss who just tells you, do this, and then you have to go and do it exactly like he says. And sometimes that in itself can be limiting because you feel like, oh, I'm not sure what he wants me to do. And then taking initiative can be a little bit difficult because you're not sure if that's what he wants in the specific way that he wants it. So we tended to have bosses that way. But I found, very quickly that working with Gen Zs is not this, you can't do that and get away with it. So how that has shaped my leadership style is because I would always say that leadership is situational. I don't think that there's any one leadership style that cuts across, and more so I have experienced that firsthand. But I would say that the two predominant styles that tend to work for me right now, and that is a combination of being authoritative in terms of this is what I want. I'm going to give you, the flexibility to do it the way that you feel comfortable, but this is what I would like us to achieve. And then at other times, because quite a number of them are young and don't have sufficient work experience, you have to also wear the coaching hat as well, in terms of, look, this is what I want. I'm going to let you do it, but you also need to consider this. Why don't you think about this? Why don't you, oh, I see that you're doing it this way. Can you, consider this as well? So it's been a little bit of a mix of both. authoritative and coaching. I think that's where we are now in terms of the level where the business is at this time. This is what is working for me.
Yeah, I feel like there's something which people always say, it's like, it's not just being a manager, it's being a leader. So you can give people the tasks, you can tell them exactly what you want to do, but it's also leading them. You are the example. And especially, like you say, when you have your younger employees, they're really going to look to you to see where do they want to be in the next sort of 10 years, where do they want to achieve. So I think it's really good that you can strike that balance. So speaking of actually in the next sort of 5-10 years, where do you see Bostocke Close Investments in the next 5 years?
So one of the things we want to do, a key focus, like I said, is facilitating access where access is limited. About 49-50% of businesses in Nigeria currently don't have access to finance. So that's a big issue. Of course, there are structural challenges to be overcome, but where we see ourselves is being a dominant player in providing access to where access is limited. That's the key focus, and that's where we're going to be.
That's really good.
Of course, one step at a time.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like it's always great to have those 5-year goals, but as you're in such a dynamic and fast-paced industry, it's always like, hey, let's just get to the end of the week. So a little bit more about sort of your philosophy and who you are as professional and personal. So you have experience and expertise in developing and implementing these youth-centric corporate social responsibility projects. Would you be able to tell me more about the most impactful projects that you've worked on and what kind of outcomes have you seen?
Okay, so yeah, sometime around 2010, we developed a program with the MTN Foundation, which essentially is a science and technology scholarship scheme. Now, that was scheduled to be a 5-year program. MTN, which is, of course, probably already know, but they're a telecom provider in Nigeria and across other countries in Africa. And that program was designed to improve the pipeline of talent in the sciences and technology. Of course, MTN being a technology company. So it was a good focus area for them. So they earmarked about just over $6 million at the time for that project for 5 years, and supporting young people who were in tertiary education and were doing well in tertiary education. So this was about, at the time, I remember it was about 200,000 naira, which is a lot of money in 2010, to support them, through school. And every year they will get those funds so long as they maintain certain grade level in school. So this program, coincidentally, is still operational to today. I mean, that tells me, this is 2010, this is 2023, so it's over 10 years now operational. So that tells me that it's working, and there's a lot of impact in that area. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the numbers in terms of total number of people that they've supported to date, but I know that if you take 200,000 naira and split it across $6.3 million US, that's quite a number of people, and that was for 5 years. This is 13 years now, so I know that that's been quite impactful for them and for those who have been beneficiaries of that program. We also supported the International Youth Foundation and Samsung, which was the major sponsor for that program, to support young people with employability skills so that when they transition, so it was more or less a transition program from school to work. And that we did again around 2009. We started that with Samsung, and then we also had a similar program with the T.Y. Danjuma Foundation, which is a local foundation in Nigeria. Now, those programs combined at the time, I think we raised somewhere around 250,000 US dollars to support just slightly under 600 people, 600 graduates between 2009 and 2011 while I was managing those programs. And this was, again, a transition program from, school to work, which is a major issue in terms of youth unemployment in Nigeria. It's quite high. It's higher now than it was at the time. Of course, there's all sorts of reasons why that has remained, but it is a big issue, and we thought that we could support these young people with interventions that will make that process a lot more seamless. And now, being an employer, I appreciate the rationale for doing these kind of programs now, because oftentimes when I interact with people that I'm looking to employ or people that I'm looking to work with, skills never so much of an issue. It's just the application and how they're able to apply themselves in the workplace that is the real problem. So I now understand why these programs are even more relevant as they were when we started it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I just have one last question before I let you get back to your day. In your experience, has something which has not gone as planned, whether it's a challenge or decision that you weren't expecting, which has given you a life lesson and something that you take on board with you now?
There are many of them so far. Yeah, there are many of them. And, it's almost, you feel like every other day poses a new challenge, especially when you're, in Lagos, especially. It's pretty fast. But being in the business that I am today, I think I'll speak from, from that perspective. I once attended a seminar where Aliko Dangote, who's probably the wealthiest man in Africa, he was talking about how he makes investment decisions and the need to understand the value chain, the process of how money is actually made, how it's invested. And I just wanted to add something to that. I think the little time that I have spent in this line of business, I think that knowledge and some level of control is the best way, or is a very good way to go about that. So I want to add control to knowledge. Mm-hmm. Knowledge is key, but I think control is even a lot more important, because oftentimes, you may understand the process, but certain areas within the value chain, it's imperative that you retain control. Otherwise, you could fall flat. And just having this knowledge now, and I'm so happy that some of these mistakes were made early on. And then so when you make these kind of mistakes, and when you're working with money, it's even a lot more difficult to take. But when you're able to learn these lessons early, then I think you'll set yourself up for greater success in the future. And I mean, I really admire some of these big entrepreneurs who lose values in the billions in a day and they're still standing. I often ask myself, oh my God, if I lost $5 billion, I lost $100 billion value in a day, would I still be standing? So that's, I think, one big lesson that I learned is not only to have knowledge of the process, but also to retain some level of control of that process as well before you commit to making an investment.
That's really good to know. Thank you. Yeah, so as you know, I work at Verto and we have our co-founders, Ola and Anthony, and I feel I always look to them for their kind of words of wisdom, because, I mean, as you say, these people who have these billion-dollar businesses, I would absolutely freak out if I lost money, and to be able to communicate with people who are leaders, who are founders of businesses, and to try and take on board their learnings, I freak out if I even lose like my phone. So let alone if I lost, you know, a lot of money in a business. So it's really good to hear this and to take it on board and, you know, be better in my professional career. And so yeah, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And also thank you so much for your time. Those are the questions I had for you. I really appreciate you sitting down with me today. It's been so wonderful to meet you, hear more about your journey, hear more about Bostocke Close Investments. And yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my business and my person.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week.